Welcome back to Naval Action and episode 8 of A Letter to the King. If you're new to the series, Letter to the King is my attempt to keep you up to date with the heave and the ho of all the PvP action on the PvP Euro 1 server. Let's remind ourselves where we were as of last week. So there'd been a whole bunch of Spanish-British warfare going on over here with the Americans dipping in around these islands. The British had established a fairly good bridgehead on the south of Cuba. The Americans were still holding the Bahamas. The pirates, who'd sworn revenge against the Americans, had started to push up the coast of Florida. The Dutch had expanded their foothold on Haiti. The Swedes had popped up for a bit of a biff, although a shot had been fired that will echo through this week at Road Town. Just remind yourselves that the Danes let the pirates into Road Town. Now there's various stories here. A couple of clans let them in, maybe not all the clans let them in. The pirates came to Road Town so that they could push into the Swedes to basically stretch the Swedes, a small nation, and stop them playing around here. The Swedes had made a run a couple of times to this neck of the woods on the tip of Cuba. In doing so, the Swedes had retaliated, but not only had they taken what the Danes felt was one of their territories here, they'd also hit a couple of other Danish ports. And the Danes felt very angry that the Swedes had broken a long-standing truce. The French, with help from the Danes, had eventually pushed the British out of Arves, Aves, Arves, Aves, Raves, Aves, and there was one more thing we need to remember from last week. Come on, Mr. J. There was a little bit of toing and froing here between the Brits and the Danes, but the Danes had pretty much cleared the Brits out, which had pushed them all the way back to Jamaica. And that was more or less where we were at the end of last week. So what has transpired this week? Well, a lot. A lot. This map is changed heaps. If we go in, and what we'll do is we'll start over here off the top of the Yucatan and into Mexico. And what we had was the Brits and the Americans pushed the Spanish out totally from this neck of the woods, and the Spanish never really made much of a run back at this area for the rest of the week. However, what the Spanish did do was get in a real tug-of-war with the Brits across the south of Cuba, and actually into Cayman Brac and Little Cayman too. There was a lot of fighting going on around here. The Brits were trying to take some of the shallow waters, the Spanish were fighting back, and there was pretty much every night an exchange of ports in this neck of the woods. By the end of it all, the Spanish probably came out on top. They recaptured their shallow ports, and although I think the Brits, I think this is Jaguar, eventually recovered Jaguar, they never managed to get a consolidated push into the tip here of Cuba. And what was very noticeable was the Spanish were fielding far superior fleets and were far more coordinated. And to be honest, they kind of outdid the Brits a couple of times. They outdid the Brits in Cayman, Little Cayman, and they also outdid the Brits who launched an attack. The Spanish launched a counter-attack, and pretty much both the British attack on both ports failed, and the Spanish managed to recapture one of theirs. So although the Spanish are out of here, they seem to have consolidated. They pushed north, or held the north here, and they're fielding a stronger fleet now, and I think this is going to be a stretch for the Brits to hold on, certainly in the guts here, and I think they're going to have constant fighting across Cayman Brac, Little Cayman and Georgestown. So victory as far as the number of ports were concerned. The Brits really solid in this area. to the point where they were literally blockading the Spanish during the week on the few ports they held until the timers came up and they could be taken back. But the Spanish now seem to have consolidated. They're kind of on home turf in this neck of the woods. They do have their pirate friends to the north of them, and the pair of them seem to be working quite well together. And this has allowed the Spanish to build up a pretty substantial and solid fleet now. And I expect there to be a lot of biffo in this neck of the woods. And at the moment, I see the Spanish as probably having the upper arm. Now, the Brit forces that have been defending the Yucatan, will they just stay and hold the Yucatan, or will they start lending their muscle to the fight? Only time will tell, and they may have other concerns, and we'll come to that later. So the pirates just went mad. They smashed up the Florida coast, and then they've cut right across the Gulf. And this, I think, must be the most number of ports that have fallen in a week in a single campaign. If you consider that the pirates retook the Bahamas, cleared out the Swedes across the top here. They also ran all the way up this coast, capping pretty much every cappable port, and now they've pushed all the way across there, and the US are reduced to just a couple of dozen ports now. And this is the worst situation they've been in. Now, chatting to a couple of US players, they weren't so concerned about this area. They don't do much of their biffo fleeting and trading and the likes up here, but this has got to hurt. Surely now the US has to get themselves together and start trying to push back. And I have noticed for the first time that there's a few rogue US players beginning to pick some of the Brits off who were operating in these waters, around here and around here and around here. And I am wondering if some of the Americans aren't quite so pleased with the deal they made with the British. It certainly, port count wise, hasn't gone very well for them. There is a certain element in the US who are waiting for the new port battles, because the big Santee fleets are pretty unstoppable unless you've got a huge number on, and just the timing of it isn't working out at all for the US. So for me, it's a big question. We're folding in another server. PvP3 comes over. That's another bunch of players. Will some of the player base go to the Americans, go to the US forces, and perhaps help push back and recover some of their territory? At the moment, you could almost see the Americans being pushed back to a single port, which is why I wonder the British fleet that's defended the Yucatan and really smashed the Spanish, will they get drawn into this battle here? That's going to be very interesting. Very interesting. So the pirates, crazy bonkers. 36 ports were captured in a 7-day period, which is just it's 10 million gold in flags alone. Forget the time you need to spend and the fleets you need to assemble and the coordination you need to do. Sorry. So the pirates, absolute smasheroos. And they weren't content with just biffing. There's been a number of pirate raids back onto Jamaica. So Jamaica had a week off last week. It was wonderful. We had a party, if you recall. But the pirates launched multiple attacks against Montego and Savannah and even St. Anne. Now, and they grabbed up one of the islands here, Georgetown from memory. And this is kind of a bit of a side story I'll go into now here, in that this is the wonderfulness and the terribleness of defending where your puppies live. So this isn't a pro or a negative puppy or a pro or a negative clan thing. 2 or 3 times large second and third rate fleets came down to attack Jamaica, and it was the pubbies who screened and held them up long enough for the British firsts to sail around the island. It's one of these funny things. It doesn't look far to get from here to here, but if you have to sail like so, or like so in a horseshoe around Jamaica, you're guaranteed almost that half the journey's against the wind if the people pulling the flag have got half a brain. And the average pirate comes close to half a brain, is the assessment of the Royal Navy. And on a number of times, the puppies did well, and they screened the pirates to such an extent with the first early half of the week, the pirate pushes, not only were they stopped, but because the puppies got in the way and held them up, the big fleet could come round, and then the pirate fleet really was taken to pieces, and there was lots of ships captured, and stories of Santi being captured by 3 mercs and a trink, and all sorts of fandangled things, because a defeated large fleet that has to evacuate is in a lot of trouble. Different ships get pulled in, people try to teleport home, and that was the glory of the puppies. So the recovery of Georgetown and the defence of Montego and Savannah. But then there's also the travesty of the puppies. Subsequently, the pirates launched from, I think it was probably from Tiburon, it may have been from this side here, Escadino. They launched an attack on Montego, and the puppies did the right thing. They ran around, they defended, and they screened, and then a 25 first-rate fleet of the Brits appeared. But they couldn't engage the pirates because every time they came out, the puppies would jump in and they'd get massacred, because this was Pavels and third rates and Bolognas and so on and so forth. And of course, the danger is that 2 or 3 of the first rates get sucked in, and then you're starting to lose your prize ships. So defending in your own waters is really a double-edged sword. It would be true wherever you are. An organised fleet is just that. A well-organised 20-25 ship fleet comprising predominantly of first, second or third rates will smash an unorganised fleet, even of equivalent BR. It will doubly smash a fleet that isn't on the team speak, that isn't coordinating, that doesn't have a single voice. So although the first few defences were valiant, the last defence of Montego Bay turned into a bit of a calamity, because basically the puppies kept jumping in. The big ships could never get in to take the biffo to the pirates. Now, what happened subsequently was that the British fleet nicked the big fleet. The first rates went and took Portillo. But then when they hit over here, I can't remember which battle it was. I think it was Tiburon or St. Nick. When they hit over here, they basically met the fleet that they should have been able to sink off Montego Bay, and they met that fleet, and that fleet defended brilliantly. Basically, if you're in attack defense, if you're attacking a port, what the defenders can do is they can put 3 ships to the tip of the line. They can focus fire down one of the attackers. When those 3 ships take damage, they can peel off to the back and hide and repair and turn to show their good side, whereas the attackers can't do that as easily. They're up against a timer and towers, and the pirate fleet took the British fleet to pieces here. And a lot of first rates went to the bottom for the Brits, and I think the pirate fleet might have even ended up being unscathed, or a lot very close to sinking. But nonetheless they were unscathed, and that was a domino from the failure to sink those ships. Many of them would have been 1 durability ships outside Montego, which would have sort of weakened the resolve at the very least. The pirates also had another big win against the Dutch, and they completely obliterated the Dutch and the Swedes off Haiti and sent the Dutch packing. So by the end of the week, the pirates had not only hassled the Brits, they'd retaken all of the north of Haiti. They'd secured all the bananas, run all the way up the coast, and halfway round to the other coast of the US, which is staggering. The Brits and the Danes played tug of war across the south of Haiti, and even over here a little bit, the Brits and the Danes have been swapping ports. And this is really the Brits attempting to some extent to support the Swedes by pushing into the Danes. The Danes, again, they kind of like the pirates, they know what they're doing. There's been some massive open world battles here, and the Brits and the Danes are having a fantastic amount of PvP, and it's good quality stuff, good fleets. Um, there's all sorts of stories, horror stories of first rates getting caught out in the open, and stories of huge 10, 15 and 20 first rate dominated fleets getting involved with each other. And indeed, I believe the Brits made a little run for Aves as well. I'm not sure if that was a serious run, but certainly a probe to see if the French were awake and defending it, and they were, and they sunk the invaders. Now, after the toing and froing here, we should really focus on what has perhaps been the real story of the week. We've got to give half the week to the pirates, and I mean, they've almost created a pirate hemisphere here. They've taken so much of the map. But perhaps what has happened over here is the most significant story other than the pirates. As I said at the start, there was the Road Town incident, and that brought the Swedes and the Danes into biff. And the Danes were very upset that the Swedes had broken the treaty in their eyes. The Swedes were very upset that the Danes had broken the treaty in their eyes. As is always, so this is almost like Sarajevo and one lone bullet causing all sorts of knock-on effects. The Danes made it their duty to take every Swede port. That was their goal. And the French agreed to help. Between the two of them, they really put the squeeze on the Swedes, and the Swedes took advantage of a new system that the British have invented over here. This is called Air PnB, where you can actually rent a port. And the Danes, and indeed the Americans, have taken advantage of this, and there's a few noisy neighbours now inside the main British holdings that stretch from the Yucatan all the way down to South America proper. And this in itself has caused a few ructions in the British community, because there's a number of folks who had ports and shipyards and buildings here, and these guys they're up all night playing their thrash death metal and keeping all the Brits awake at night. So that's interesting, but perhaps one of the more significant developments now, whether or not this will be diplomacied out, I don't know, but along with the Swedes getting stuck in with the Danes and the French, the Dutch started hitting into the French, and there was a lot of fighting that took place around some of the big strategic ports like Pampatas down here, and some huge fights going. These are proper first, second, and third rates. There's, people know about the dread fleets that the pirates have, and they know about the big fleets that the primary British clans have. But the Swedes fielded a lot of first rates. Most of them got sent to the bottom by the Danes, which is a real struggle for the Swedes, because as a smaller nation, you don't tend to have a backup first-rate fleet and a second backup first-rate fleet, which perhaps some of the bigger nations can field. The French and the Dutch, they've got serious fleets, and there's been a lot of toing and froing going on across both the mainland and up the Antilles. And we've got the Swedes now, they're almost not on the map. There's only really the capital, the uncapturable capital, and the odd port that they're being able to nick back. The French are putting the squeeze on them, the Danes are putting the squeeze on them, and to some extent their only hope is the Dutch. Have the Dutch got the gumption to keep slogging it out with the French, or will one of them sue for peace? I know that one of the big Dutch clans kind of disintegrated at the start of the week, which perhaps is the reason they collapsed in Haiti so quickly. They're reforming. Will they reform with the same mindset? Difficult to know. So really a tale of two stories. The little war, the little European biffo, World War, what would it be? World War Zero, I'd imagine, that the Swedes have kicked off over here. The Danes fighting on two fronts. If they turn their back to concentrate only on the Brits, the Swedes will come back at them. They might not have huge numbers, but they will come back at them. Equally, the French have got to keep pressure on the Swedes to the north, while at the same time, the Dutch are getting stuck into them. And if the Dutch can muster the same conviction they did when they came into Haiti, that could give the French real entertainment. All of this in the shadow of the new port battles, which we're expecting out probably next week, maybe Wednesday or Thursday of this week, and the merger of PvP3 onto the server, which should bring, an extra 100 players to every time zone, and several hundred players overall. Where will those players go? Will they join the scourge that is the black? Will they join the Americans who, held 80 ports not so long ago? Will they look to an underdog nation like the Swedes, or perhaps even the Dutch? The French and the Danes are probably crying out for reinforcements. The Spanish are assembling more powerful fleets. That might be seen as attractive. And then, of course, there's the correct thing to do, which is to sign up with the British. We'll see where these new players go. If we look at where the pressure's going to be next week, well, it's going to be pretty much map wide, other than in Party Street here. I think Party Street's going to be fine. The question here for me isn't so much will the Spanish come back. They might do. It's what do the Brits do in response to the pirate scourge that's pushing down on the Americans. Will the Americans be expecting the Brits to assist them there? Is there any spine left for the Americans to come down Florida? I don't think so, not next week. I think that's too soon. They have to focus here. That's my guess. There's a tug-of-war going on here. I personally feel as at the moment the Spanish have the upper hand in that. They seem to have the more consistent fleet sizes. It seems a little patchy from the Brits. Should be noticed the pirates snuck an island here in the triangles or whatever they're called. I can't remember which one it is. It might be Placer. I can't recall. And that's a sort of strategically, well, it's good and bad for the pirates. It's good in that they can hit out in pretty much any direction they want to. It's bad because it's right hard to get your ships there. You've got to cap ships, you've got to teleport them there, then you've got to burn your teleport itself. And that basically costs you, you do one teleport and, 3 hours either side of that teleport, you're in the wrong place. So it's hard holding these. You saw the Brits with Aves. They held it for a week, but that was a real effort to hold it for a week. So that's going to be very interesting. We've got the new port battle mechanics. That could change everything. Haiti it's sad really. It was a beautiful multicoloured cauldron of ethnicity, and now really it's back to the three powers who collectively just look like a bit of a black eye. You've got the pirates, the Danes and the Brits. There'll be some good fighting there, I suspect. I'm very interested to see what happens between the Dutch and the French. Have they got the resolve to keep it up? To some extent, if the Dutch pull out, well, what else have they got to do? They're all the way over here. They could turn on the Brits, but that's not a good idea. They've seen the Brit defence of this stretch of land before. You've got the Swedes in Party Central. Will they be able to muster and craft up enough ships to start fighting back over here? The Danes potentially fighting on two fronts. The French potentially fighting on two fronts. It's on for young and old. Let's have a little look at the scores on the doors and slap me daft and tickle me with a feather. The pirates, 39 ports they captured. They almost doubled their holdings. I've invented a double green arrow machine for this. It's bazookas. So they've gone from below 40 ports 2 weeks ago to over 90 ports now, and they're back at the top of the tally board. The Brits actually made a gain which surprised me. to be honest. I didn't think so, but when you look at the number of ports they took off the Spanish in the Yucatan and Mexico, that probably covers the Air PnB ports they've given away in South America proper, and a few of the ports that they may have lost around Haiti and Cuba. I think they're probably almost even balanced there. The Dutch lost a number of ports, and predominantly that was the withdrawal from Haiti. The French have gained a couple. They would have gained more, I think, if the Dutch hadn't have got stuck into them, and the Dutch losses would have been higher. They've taken ports at the expense of the Swedes. The Spanish overall lost ports, but I think they're in a stronger position than they were before. Certainly the fleets they're fielding look better. The Danes surprisingly made a net loss. Now, one of the reasons for that is some of the ports that were captured initially by the Dutch were actually Danish ports, and they've actually been recaptured by the pirates. So although the Danes have eaten into a lot of the Swedish ports, the Brits pushing into Danish territory, and the pirates effectively capping ports that used to be Danish has led them down their way, the Americans have collapsed from top 3 for the past 2 months to near enough sitting on the bottom of the ladder. 30 ports they lost. That is crazy. And the previous week they'd lost 20 odd ports. So they're in a lot of trouble. And the Swedes, really 9 ports is flattery, because 5 of those are rental rooms in their mate's house. They're down to 2 or 3 ports in their own neck of the woods. And that's more or less it for Letter to the King. I'm going to leave this map up with the close. If you comment with a link of a video that is a battle that's taken place in the last week, or a screenshot of a port battle, I know one of the guys sent me a couple of links to show the smashing of the British fleets here, and also some of the Danish victories over here. Unfortunately, you're sending them me in in-game mail, and you can't cut and paste from in-game mail because it's 1815 as far as that sort of technology goes. If you can send them to me on the forum as a link, Jeheil on the forum, the Games Labs forum, or even in reply to the video, what I'll do is I'll stick an annotation on the map, and we can use that if there's especially if we've got some nice port videos. I am thinking of opening this up to annotate to the public, but I'm a bit wary about that because I've seen some of the stuff that gets kicked around. Anyway, I've now got folks sending me in information from every corner of the nations, apart from the Americans, who might all be dead, and the Spanish, who don't like me because I think they probably see me in more battles than any other nation does, so they just probably want to sink me. Anyway, I'd be interested in that. Thank you very much for following Letter to the King. I'm having great fun doing it. I'm getting lots of good feedback. It's great just hearing the stories of the conquests and the defeats and the size of the battles that are going on down here. And to be honest, the ferocity, the anger of the Danes, the anger of the Swedes, the shock that the Dutch came in, the French riposte, the pesky pirates, and so on and so forth. I'm really enjoying getting into that. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, and I'll see you for next week with hopefully the new port battles, and let's see what that brings. I'm building up my live oak tanky connies as quickly as I can. Alright, thank you very much for listening. I will see you on the oceans, and I will catch you.